Have you ever thought about how a government gets started? I mean, really, what are its origins? Because the story of modern India's government is one of the strangest you'll ever hear. It didn't begin with a revolution or a grand declaration, but with a company. A private trading company, the East India Company, somehow built the entire administrative machine for a subcontinent. So let's get into how this absolutely wild transformation from company to crown actually happened.
All right, so to really get this, we've got to look at it in two main phases. First, there's the company rule, which kicks off in 1773. This is basically when the British government started to realize they needed to get this mega corporation under control. And then there's the Crown Rule, starting in 1858, when London just takes over completely. This is the story of that exact shift, from corporate power to direct imperial rule.
I mean, this is the big question, isn't it? How on earth does a group of merchants who are just there to trade become rulers and conquerors? Well, it wasn't one single event. It was this slow, step-by-step process that completely changed the destiny of India.
Okay, let's rewind all the way back to the beginning. The British first show up in India in the year 1600. Now, they weren't an army, they weren't colonists, not yet anyway. They were the East India Company, just a bunch of traders who had a royal charter from Queen Elizabeth I that gave them a monopoly on trade in the region. And for a long time, we're talking over a century and a half, that's all they were doing. They were merchants. Their whole world revolved around spices, textiles, and, of course, making a profit. The idea of actually governing anything was totally off their radar. But then, one thing happened that changed the entire game.
Remember this year, 1765. This is the pivot point. This is the moment where the company's entire mission, in India's future, takes a sharp, irreversible turn.
So in 1765, the company gets what's known as the Diwani. This was so much more than a business deal. It was a massive power grab. All of a sudden, they had the right to collect taxes and run the civil courts across this huge, rich territory. In that single moment, they stopped being just merchants. They became the taxman and the judge, wielding two of the most basic powers of a state. Now, you can probably imagine a private company with this much power, thousands of miles from home. It made the British government back in London extremely nervous. This wasn't just some business anymore. It was looking a lot like an empire, and they realized it had to be brought under control. So Parliament's first big move was the Regulating Act of 1773. For the very first time, they tried to impose some order from London. They created a new powerful position, the Governor-General of Bengal, and made the other big centers like Bombay and Madras report to him. They were laying the very first bricks of a central government for British India, even establishing a Supreme Court. The next move, Pitt's India Act of 1784, was even more radical. It set up this clever, kind of complicated system called a double government. Think of it this way. The company's directors, they could keep managing the day-to-day business, the commercial stuff. But a new, powerful board of control, appointed by the government in London, would now handle all the important things: political, military, and financial decisions.
And in that act was one crucial piece of language. For the very first time, the company's lands were officially called the British possessions in India. The mask was off. This was a huge symbolic shift. It wasn't just a company's territory anymore. London was now claiming it as their own, right there on paper.
So with London now holding the political reins, the goal became pretty simple: make that control even stronger. Pretty much all the laws that followed were designed to centralize power and create one single, undisputed authority across all of British India. You can really see the progression here. It starts in 1773 with a Governor-General for Bengal, but it all leads up to the Charter Act of 1833. This act took that final step, creating the all-powerful Governor-General of India, who now had authority over the entire territory. The first person to hold that title was Lord William Bentinck.
And with that same act, the East India Company's original purpose was officially over. It wasn't a commercial company anymore. It was now just an administrative body, basically governing India on behalf of the British Crown. The transformation from a trading house to a government was finally complete.
So the next big law, in 1853, takes another huge step toward looking like a modern government. For the first time, it separated the legislative and executive functions of the Governor-General's Council. It created this little legislative council that worked like a mini parliament. It also opened up the prestigious civil service to Indians through competition.
But here's the kicker. There was this small, almost hidden detail in the 1853 Act. See, the previous charters always gave the company rule for a set period, like 20 years. This one?
It set no time limit at all. And that was a crystal clear signal. The British Parliament could now end the company's rule whenever it felt like it. The writing was on the wall.
And yeah, that end came a lot sooner than anyone thought it would. The stage was now set for the final, and most dramatic, transfer of power yet. So after all this gradual legal change, after all these acts and regulations, what was the catalyst? What was the one event that brought almost 2 centuries of company history to a sudden, crashing end?
The Revolt of 1857. It was known in Britain as the Sepoy Mutiny and in India as the First War of Independence. This massive uprising shook British control to its absolute core, and the government in London decided right then and there that a private company could no longer be trusted to manage its most valuable possession.
The aftermath was swift, it was decisive. The era of the East India Company was officially over, and the era of the British Crown, what we call the British Raj, was just beginning. In the wake of that huge revolt, Parliament passed the Government of India Act of 1858. And get this, its official title was the Act for the Good Government of India, which, you got to admit, is some pretty heavy-handed branding, promising a new, more responsible era of rule.
This was a complete system overhaul. The East India Company, abolished, gone. All of its armies, its territories, its money, everything was transferred directly to the British Crown. That complicated double government system was thrown out and replaced by a powerful new cabinet minister in London, the Secretary of State for India.
And back in India, the top job's title changed. The Governor-General was now the Viceroy. This was way more than just a name change. The Viceroy, with Lord Canning being the first one, wasn't the head of some company anymore. He was the direct, personal representative of the Queen herself. This signaled a much more formal, much more direct imperial relationship.
And just like that, the transformation was done. The long journey from a company of traders to a full-blown colonial administration run directly from London was finally complete, and the structures of government they built along the way would leave a mark that would last for decades.
You know, this whole process, this crazy journey from regulating a company to building an empire, it actually created the legal and administrative DNA of modern India. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question, doesn't it? What does it mean for a nation's government? What are the legacies, both good and bad, when its roots aren't in revolution or philosophy, but in the balance sheets of a corporation?